Mark Baker with Baker's Green Acres is here. I love the name Baker's Green Acres. Did it take you a long time to come up with this? It rhymes so well. It really does just flow right off the tongue.
No, it was a joke at first.
Well, people always make fun of us because we're kind of city people, and now we're trying to do the farm thing. And whenever I post videos, they're like, you need to wear a boa. Your husband needs to wear a suit and do like your own rendition of Green Acres. All right, Mark, you got a real education in how state government and farming works over the last decade.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of guests on over the last couple of years talking about, they would say fighting government overreach. And I thought your story was really interesting because what you've learned over the course of your contact with the government and what happened to you is that there are solutions out there. We often just kind of bemoan government overreach, that it's like they're coming after food. There's this globalist food grab and it ends there. And there's not a whole lot of solutions other than, hey, try to buy from your local farmer. But there are farmers who watch this. And I think also the consumers would find it really interesting, the solutions that you have come across. But I think we've got to first start with the problem. Okay. So we're going back in time, like almost 12 years. What was the first contact that you had with somebody for the state of Michigan when you knew, okay, something's going awry?
Okay. So, at the time, we were doing business with local restaurants, and we had a high-end restaurant up in Traverse City, and we stopped in there to sell them some of the meat from our pigs or make a delivery. And the guy says to me, "Hey, you didn't know? Your pigs are illegal now." And so I said, "No, I didn't know about that." And I got on the phone and called my state representative, and he says, "Oh, yeah. The Department of Natural Resources has deemed your pigs feral, and feral pigs are illegal," he said. So I was, at that time, I was out of the Air Force like maybe 6 years. This is in 2011. And I really didn't know the difference between legal and against the rules. I really didn't know. I'd been dealing with military law, and I'm in the civilian world now, and it was all different. And as I started asking around, more information flowed in. But basically what they did is the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture together came up with what they called the declaratory ruling. So they just put this order out to the public saying that if you have pigs that are that have one of 9 characteristics that they listed, then your pigs are illegal, they said, and you have to get rid of them right away. And they actually said we had to get rid of them by April 1st of 2012. So it didn't make sense.
What was their reasoning? How did they sell this as a necessity for the state of Michigan?
Well, as usual, they come up with a problem, right? So they said, oh, the state of Michigan is being overrun with feral pigs. And they list all this anecdotal evidence about they're here and they're here. Oh, and they kill baby ducks and baby deer and dig up golf courses. But nobody here in Michigan has ever seen them. They just made it up. And then they put it in the news and people are outraged. And then they say, well, here's the solution. We got to put all these pig farmers out of business because their pigs are getting away and then they're breeding out in the woods and creating this huge problem. The only problem was nobody had evidence that this was happening. Nobody.
If you're somebody who is not eating Mark's food, you might have issues with your liver or other issues because you're eating too many processed foods. You can go to getliverhelp.com/Alison and check out this liver supplement. You will get an omega-3 fish oil too for free. I will read you the ingredients real fast. It's all natural: turmeric, beetroot, glycine, dandelion powder, artichoke extract, ginger powder, milk thistle extract, organic alfalfa powder, bioperine, which is black pepper, and L-cysteine. So it's a product that helps detox your liver. Basically, it helps your liver push out toxins. It helps with energy. If you got fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, stuff like that, then it might be worth not only I can't highly recommend this enough. Get off sugar and processed foods. But if you want to give your liver a little bit of a boost, go to getliverhelp.com/Alison and check it out. So your concern when you're talking to them about this is that, well, first off, they haven't proven their case, or that
No,
they haven't proven that they have the legal right to even make that case, that it's
no,
like, no.
no, they didn't make their case at all. And we were the only farm that just said, not going to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, I didn't really know much about the law, the Constitution, even though I had taken oath to the Constitution 5 times in my military career. I never really, I never really read it. I knew I had the right to free speech, except certain words, right? And no, I didn't really know much. So we hired a lawyer, and the lawyer took us down a path of compromise with the state. What the state wanted to do was say, oh, well, you can keep them, but you have to have a license from us because they're dangerous, and if we don't provide oversight, they could get away and, harm children and the environment and all that stuff. And I didn't want to get a license with them. So I just said no. And I wound up firing that attorney because he didn't want to talk about the Constitution at all. Not at all. He didn't want anything to know about that. Matter of fact, he recommended we don't talk Constitution in a court of law at all. Right. So then we hired another one, and that didn't go a lot better. But there was some talk that I was going to let her go in the courtroom and then, talk to the judge about my constitutional rights to my property, which is guaranteed under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. So what the state did at the 11th hour is they moved for a dismissal. So they basically said to the judge, okay, we don't want to fight with Baker's anymore. We don't have a problem with his pigs anymore.
Okay.
And the judge is like, well, how come? You have for the last 3 years. Now what's going on? And they said, we just don't have a problem with his pigs anymore. And the judge said, okay, well, there's no conflict. So case dismissed. And we had a lot of legal bills built up because there was so much that we didn't know going through this process.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the struggle, and I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version for sure, there was a lot more drama involved. There was big fines. There was threats of arrest. There was threats of taking our children from us. Jeez. And at the end of the day, we prevailed. One farm prevailed against the Attorney General, against the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Natural Resources, which were the 3 biggest budgets in the state. So they use our tax money against us. But we prevailed because of this document that I took an oath to and your husband took an oath to, and it's the U.S. Constitution. That's why we won. The Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It was that simple. And I don't think we realized the gravity of that until years later.
Okay, I'm going to look up the Fifth Amendment right now so we can look at it. To me, when I hear you tell that story, it just sounds like the government will try to do whatever it decides it wants to do until somebody pushes back and it's just like, no, I'm not. And then it's like
Exactly.
ripping the curtain back from the wizard. And you're like, oh, that's the Wizard of Oz.
Excellent analogy.
Why do you think many of us walk around with the assumption that we have to do what they say?
Well, I think we've been bred that way since the time we were in elementary school. You have to raise your hand to talk. You have to raise your hand to go to the bathroom, to get a drink. And it just carries on. I even did that. I came out of the military after 20 years in. I was in my 40s, and I still felt like I needed to check with the Department of Agriculture before I opened up this farm. And I don't know why I did that. Now that I've gone through the struggle and I get to see exactly who they are and what their mission is, I don't know why I ever checked with them in the first place. But that's going to be the end of the story, because this does turn out really good. And I'm really glad to be doing this interview because people need to know there are answers to this. Very easy answers, too.
Okay, at Cornell Law School's website, they have the whole Fifth Amendment here, but I'm guessing, is this the part that was key for you? Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation.
Let's see, nor deprived, just
Oh,
before that,
okay.
nor deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Very important
Okay.
word there is law. So
All
the
right.
departments,
Dissect that for us.
what's that?
Dissect that for us. Why?
Okay. The departments, all the departments, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture, you name it. They all come up with regulations, and that's their purview. I can come up with regulations. You can come up with regulations. But that doesn't mean that I have to follow their regulations if they are not consistent with my constitutional rights. So when the Department of Agriculture says you must depopulate your animals, your pigs, because we say so, that's not good enough. But for most people, it is, because they don't know how to navigate those waters. We haven't been taught that, right? Now, if they had gone to the state legislature and got a law passed, and that's a law process, saying that you can't have pigs, any pig out on pasture, then I would comply with a law. But I'm not going to comply with the regulations that they pull out of their back pocket. They just make them up. And that's like the regulation. If you allow me to expound on the regulation, when you read it, it sounds like something that the staff from Saturday Night Live came up with. And if you allow me to expound on that, I will. But when we read it, we thought, this doesn't make any sense, because they said any pig with a straight tail is a feral pig. And then they said any pig, oh yeah, with a curly tail, those are feral too. Any pig with a floppy ear, oh yeah, that's a feral pig. Any brown pig, that's a feral pig for you. Any pig. And then they said any pig with a distinct skeletal structure, oh, that's a feral pig right there. No qualifiers, and on it went. And then they said other characteristics not currently known to the scientific community. That's a feral pig. I'm not kidding. They had it in writing. And when we got this document, we thought, come on, this is a joke here. But it's sort of like we've seen a lot of things since then, like with COVID-19 and everything, even this latest thing that's going on, or these string of things that are going, they just don't make sense. So that is a propaganda tool that they use. And most people will just throw their hands up and say, well, I don't want to deal with it. And I think maybe I would have done that in a different lifetime, but I had just come out of the military and I was still on the fight anyway. And it just felt good to kind of lock horns with them. They're extremely unprofessional people, like the DNR especially, real unprofessional people. And when you talk to them, it just angers you that they have the authority, or I thought they had the authority that it seemed as though they did at the time. Now, the other side of it, I just disregard them like a turd if I found it in my soup. They have very little authority on private property, none on private property.
Well, unless, like you said, you get a contract with them, which is called a license, right? And in which case, are you screwed if you say, oh, I was just trying to do the right thing, I got a license to work with the government, now you've signed the contract and now you're kind of screwed?
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like you were talking in that presentation that I heard with the guy who got thrown off YouTube because he's a homesteading channel. That was a really good talk too. He entered into a contract with them, to be monetized. And then they didn't like what he said, so they pulled the monetization. That's their prerogative. If you enter into a contract with the DNR or Department of Agriculture, if you enter into a contract and you sign on the dotted line, whatever you've signed to, you've agreed to that. So like in our case, we had several licenses here for our butcher shop and our food processing facility, and they had access to my property 24/7. So that was on me. You know, I didn't have to enter into that contract with them, but I thought it was a good idea because I was a good law abiding, you know, GI coming out of the military. I thought it was the thing to do, but it was actually the wrong thing to do. Right. Because there is what I like to call now the original contract, and the original contract is the Bill of Rights to the U.S. Constitution. So state employees, county employees, federal employees are always required by law to take an oath to that document, just like I had to do as a military person. Only difference is that I can be put against the wall and shot, and they most likely will not be, but they are still bound by, you know, the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth. The Fourth Amendment is probably the Fourth and Fifth are probably the ones that we use the most. Fourth Amendment says that they can't come on my property unless they have an invitation or a warrant signed by a judge. That's a pretty tall order to get a warrant because that requires criminal activity. Nothing that we're doing on the farm is criminal. When we violate a contract, let's say with the Department of Agriculture, that's the same as if me and you had a contract. Like, let's say you were going to pay me for this interview and we have a contract, and then you welched on the deal. That's not criminal. That is civil. And I could haul you into court. Probably wouldn't work out too well, seeing as I'm in Michigan, you're in Florida. But the difference between civil and criminal are like night and day. So if you get in a contract with the Department of Agriculture for your farming operation, like I think you've contemplated that, and there's a dispute between the two of you, the Department of Agriculture, the only thing that they can do is summons you to court. And at that time, you would just get out of the contract, and they got, you know, case dismissed because there's no contract anymore, right? So I heard your interview with Ashley, and I know Ashley pretty good now. We've been helping them, and
Nourish Cooperative, in case people were wondering, they're the ones that dumped $90,000 worth of raw dairy products.
Yeah. But I hope you interview her again. She would be the first one to tell you that she screwed up by getting in a contract with the Department of Agriculture. She did not have to. She was coerced into it. And, you know, I don't really hold it against them. They're running a business. And so they tell you, you got to have this license. But if you did have to have a license, I mean, let's say it was required under the law, then we would have a law to back it up, and then everybody would have licenses. But I've been operating now, and this is proof of concept right here. I've operated now my farm. We milk cows, we make cream, we make butter, we butcher cattle, we butcher pigs, we butcher chickens, and anything else we take a notion to do, we do it. And I'm protected here from them. Of course, they'd love to have at me again, and I actually kind of miss them in a way, but they can't even come up my driveway because of the Fourth Amendment. And my processes, which we read in the Fifth Amendment, my life, my liberty, and my property, which is also my process. My process is I butcher my own cattle. You got a law against it? They don't. They have their little regulations, but I don't have a license saying that I will go by their regulations. So I have no agreement. So let's say the Department of Ag says, well, he's selling raw milk there on his place. Well, if they don't like it, they can refer me to the state police. And let's see if the state police are going to come up the driveway because I'm selling raw milk. It's not going to happen. So this whole thing, you know, about this oppression against farms is somewhat voluntary.
Mhm.
You don't have to do business with the Department of Ag, and then they have no access to you. They have no access to your personal effects, your papers, your computer. They can't even come on your property without an invitation from you or a warrant from a judge. And like I said, they will not get a warrant from a judge unless there is criminal activity. So it's really very simple to not do business with them.
What would be an example of criminal activity?
Oh, let's say we're a farm and we manufacture methamphetamine.
Or what about they say you're abusing animals or something?
Yeah, if there's a law against it, I don't really know if there is.
Animal cruelty law or something like that.
If there is one, I don't know. I know it's nothing that we really do here.
Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about then is like, what does that look like to farm without a license? Because you and I talked before the show, it doesn't mean you can just like go do anything. Like you can't go to the farmers markets necessarily and expect to be on county property, thumb your nose at the government, not have your license. Like it does seem like you have to be particular about who you're selling to, how your I guess commerce is happening in order to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for failure. So we're going to talk about that in a second. If you actually are somebody who still has real mail, you got a pen and paper and a mailbox, you can send me some mail. P.O. Box 3355, Denellen, Florida. I really love getting all the mail I've been getting. I get seeds from people. I got some seeds from Sylvia in Tampa, so I can actually grow something that grows well in Florida. I'll probably still screw it up. I got this amazing print of a coyote in Chicago during COVID. This coyote just ran across the street in Chicago, in empty Chicago during COVID. So Michael Nova sent me that. I get people's loose pocket change. I get some big donations to support the show. That's awesome too. But I also just love the notes of encouragement. My kids open them up on the way back from the post office. So keep them kid friendly. We really love it. And we will send you producer artwork as soon as we possibly can. I'm trying to see if I have a piece of artwork here right now. I do not. So anyway, thank you to everybody who has been sending that. And then also over on Locals, a great way to support my work is to be on the editorial board on Locals, AlisonMorrow.locals.com. It's $5 a month and you get to put questions in ahead of time for interviews for people like Mark. So there's a bunch of questions for him because obviously this is a very hot topic. So thanks everybody who's on the editorial board. But before we get to your questions, let's just go back to Mark and talk about what do farmers then need to know? And maybe consumers need to know this just as well, like, because this would be how you would support a farmer who decides not to play the system or play into the system. How do you do business without falling into their net?
It's really pretty simple. If you were my neighbor, and let's say my dog had a litter of puppies and you wanted to buy one, that is a contract between you and me. We're not going to go up to the courthouse and say, well, what do I need to do to buy a puppy from Mark? You wouldn't do that because you just wouldn't. Or a bale of hay. Or if you wanted to ride one of my horses, there's no licensing requirement. There's no third party, right? So what you want to do is you want to find farms that are free from any of those strings and buy directly from them. That's the best way to go. And we're coming into a new age now where a lot of farms are starting to realize the freedom that they have under the U.S. Constitution. Imagine that. And farms like mine, we have a store on the farm. So our farm members or people that want to buy from us, they don't even have to be members, really. They can wheel in here, buy a hamburger, buy eggs, buy raw milk, whatever we have on the shelf. And we get stuff from other people too and put it on the shelf if we like it. And they can buy it and then take it home and consume it. There's no third party. There's no asking for permission to buy, a farm product from somebody. Mm-hmm. So that's a way to do it. You mentioned farmers markets. Farmers markets are a bad deal, and I can tell you why. As a farmer, we did them for a while. You go there, you haul a bunch of junk there. You only sell about half of it, And then you got to bring it home. You got to put it away. The packages get beat up. You spend a whole day out in the hot sun. If you've got little kids like we do or did, what do you do with them? So it's pretty cumbersome and it's not very profitable, but people do it year after year. If you're going to do that, you have to play by Department of Agriculture's rules because they interface with county health department. And the county health department, is going to require that if you're using county property to have your farm market on, you got to comply with all the rules. Of course, they're going to do that because they're kind of part of the machine. So farmers market's a bad idea. It's just a bad idea. You'd be better off in a small farming operation by just having a network that you build. We have the internet now, and you could have a database of people that you've sold to. And mothers now, young mothers especially, are looking for clean food to feed their kids. So the word gets around pretty quick, and that's the way to do it. You really don't want to be selling to retail stores because then you're competing with factory grown food that is really dirty, but it's cheap, right? So you don't want to compete with those guys. Keep your food separate from them.
You don't want to be a whiner, then be a wino. All right.
Yeah.
Mark doesn't want you to be a whiner. He wants you to remember that the Constitution is the real license that we all need. Anyway, you don't need a license to drink this wine as of yet either. If you go to the Alison Morrow Wine Club, which is at AlisonWinePromo.com, you will get 6 bottles of amazing wines. These are all like the kind of wines that your great-great-grandparents would have made, and probably they would have been legal back then. I don't know. Now they might call them bootleg. I don't know if prohibition's coming back or not at this rate. We'll see. Mark says just don't get a license. So we'll have to talk to him about how to keep the Alison Wine Club on the up and up. Anyway, these are amazing wines. See, I have one right here. I don't drink during the show, but I keep it here as inspiration because it's just that good. They're like high altitude, handcrafted, old world style wines, no dyes, no fillers, nothing artificial. It's all great stuff, and it makes for a great present. If you sign up for the club, like I said, you get 6 bottles every 3 months, and we'll all be drinking the same wine and sharing stories about it. You'll be getting updates about where they came from and who's behind them. Like you guys get to see pictures. Check out these guys here. In fact, you'll even get to meet the guy who goes all over the world looking for these very remote wines. It's just a very interesting business, honestly. It's an interesting job the guy's got. His name is Diego, and the wines that he selects are really, really good. Actually, in some cases, he kind of risked his life to get them for you. So go check him out, AlisonWinePromo.com. You'll never be empty-handed to one of those awkward cocktail parties. Grandma will appreciate it after you unfriended her on Facebook, all that stuff, AlisonWinePromo.com.